It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Friday, November 21st, a football Friday, and I'm coming to you from Cincinnati, Ohio, site of number 11 BYU versus Cincinnati. And if you're watching this show, you're looking at this room thinking, where is Mitch right now? Is he in some 1980s dorm room from a John Hughes movie? Kind of, I guess. It's a hotel that I'm at. It's a Hilton. They kind of themed the hotel after college graduate life. Pretty cool. My hotel key had a famous Cincinnati alum, Sandy Koufax, which, guilty as charged, I didn't know Sandy Koufax was a Cincinnati alum. That's on me. I know Travis Kelce is here, and the Kelce brothers are from this neck of the woods here in the Queen City, but did not know about Sandy Koufax, but kind of a different vibe on the video if you're watching on the KSL Sports YouTube. And if you're listening to the show, appreciate you for being on board today. Every single day, Cougar Tracks is holding it down, and this is a big game for BYU football, so let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into BYU Cincinnati on this Football Friday here on Cougar Tracks.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
Number 11 BYU versus Cincinnati. Kickoff at 6 p.m. on Saturday night. Extended pregame coverage from here in Cincinnati begins at noon right here on KSL News Radio. I'll get you started here with the Cougs and the Bearcats. Second ever visit to Nippert Stadium for BYU. The first was in 2016. Remember, that was Tommy Tuberville fame. Hey, quit stealing from us, Tommy. Hey, go get a job. Senator Tuberville now, we should note. Lots changed between these two programs as they're getting ready for their second clash as Big 12 foes. 2 years ago, BYU won that game in Provo, in LaVell Edwards Stadium. These are two teams heading in different directions. I thought BYU last week, 44-13 win over TCU, their most complete performance of the season, taking down the Horned Frogs. Meanwhile, Cincinnati, 2-game losing streak. They're looking for answers because their star quarterback last week, Brendan Sorsby, 2 interceptions in the game for Cincinnati. And when you look at Sorsby, his quarterback rating has completely dipped. Early in the year, it was at 184.81. Now in the month of November, 95.24. It's been cut in half. And a big issue that's been a talking point around here in Cincinnati has been man press defense and how Cincinnati has struggled against that. This is BYU defensive coordinator Jay Hill on his defense incorporating man press and if that can be effective here against the Bearcats.
Well, the more man we can play, the more we can load the box and, blitz and do some other things. So in this defense, it's very important. And having those guys on the perimeter that can play press man and off man, I think mixes, what the offensive coordinator and the quarterback are seeing. I think that's a big deal. And then if we can mix in our zones with it, I think we become the defense that we want to be. So you got to have corners that can cover in this defense.
And BYU's got those corners. Therian Alexander III and Evan Johnson, I think, have been really good. And then Maury Bamba has quietly made a lot of strides, I think, over the last 6 or so weeks in this defense. So I think if you do turn to that, and also Jonathan Cabella, too, who, remember, at that nickel position, his first game appearance was against Utah. That was back on October 18th. He's quietly getting a lot better as well. So BYU's secondary, if they want to incorporate that man press that Cincinnati has struggled with in recent weeks, I think BYU has the personnel to make that happen. The Bearcats, though, I think their identity is tied to running the football. They're second in the Big 12 Conference in league play this year, averaging 199 yards per game on the ground. Same thing for BYU. They want to run the football. BYU's averaging 195 yards per game on the ground this season, but I don't think the rushing offense has been as high-level successful in recent games as it was earlier in the year for BYU. But that performance against TCU was a step in the right direction. They're looking to build on that. But for BYU defensively, they've got to stop the run. Sorsby's a threat running the football. Evan Pryor, who's going to be returning the former Ohio State Buckeye, and then Tawi Walker. They've got personnel that can cause headaches for BYU's rush defense, particularly the defensive line. But Jay Hill feels really good about where that defensive line's at, particularly in the interior with Keanu Tanavasa and John Talmoy-Payao.
Well, the interior's playing outstanding for about 4 or 5 weeks now. They've just been very dominant inside. Any runs and stuff that we've been giving up is hitting more on the perimeter. I can't say enough about how Keanu and JT have played the last couple weeks. They've been outstanding. It's been huge having Nusi and Tausili. Just their pass rush presence the last 2 games is starting to show up. And again, that's not taken away from some of the other guys that have played a lot. Like Logan Latui continues to play at a very high level. Hunter Clegg's going to be a great player, but I see the progression of the defensive line really coming along, and that's part of the reason why we've played pretty good the last couple weeks.
Something to note, too, on BYU's defensive line from the personnel standpoint, on Thursday night in the latest availability report, Ulavai Fetuli, he was ruled out for this game. He suffered an injury in that TCU game. He was a reserve freshman D lineman. So BYU's a little bit thin at that D tackle spot because, remember, Justin Kirkland, the Oklahoma State transfer, they want to redshirt him. So it's pretty much Keanu and JT. They're going to hold it down in the interior to try to stop this Cincinnati run defense, which is a pretty good one. And for BYU, their offense, they feel really good about where their rushing attack is going with LJ Martin, who continues to get healthier by the week. And I think you saw glimpses of LJ looking like that elite running back that you saw earlier in the year against TCU. Keep in mind, LJ Martin, 88 yards away from 1,000 rushing yards this year. It's hard to believe that when LJ hits that mark, assuming he gets to that, it will only be the 4th 1,000-yard rushing season in the Kalani Sitake era and only the 3rd different player to hit that mark under Sitake. The other 2, Jamal Williams in 2016, Tyler Algier, 2020 and 2021. His performance in 2021, Algier, that was a single-season rushing record in BYU football history. And also of note, if LJ wants to go ham on Cincinnati, and their rush defense is not great. The Bearcats are giving up 158 yards per game on the ground this season, about 85th, 86th nationally in college football this year. If LJ wants to have a special career-type day, he's 242 yards away from emerging as 10th all-time in career rushing yards in BYU football history. 10th all-time is Pete Van Valkenburg. So LJ quickly moving up the ladder in the career rushing yards mark for the Cougars. I also think, too, Bear Bachmeier, obviously curious to see how he performs in this game, but I think you get to the point where you know Bear's going to be good. I know that last road game against Texas Tech, an elite defense, he struggled mightily, but Bear, I think we forget, he's 2nd in the Big 12 in total offense this year. That's how good Bear has been. I mean, he's putting up numbers that make you say not only is he the freshman of the year, I think that should be a shoo-in. They should almost rewrite a freshman of the week recognition in name of Bear Bachmeier. I think he's making a great case to be offensive player of the year in the league, and he's doing it both on the ground and through the air. Sawyer Robertson for Baylor's number 1 in total offense in the Big 12, but only he does it through the air, and that's not a good football team at Baylor. Whereas Bear Bachmeier, he's leading BYU to heights where they might have a chance to go to the Big 12 championship game with a true freshman, and he's one of the best players offensively in the Big 12 this season. So I think BYU's feeling pretty good about where their offense is at. Obviously, you got to have to retool the offensive line without Waylon Lapuaho, but you feel good about Sonny Mocassini, Kyle Safara-Choke, Austin Leausa. They're going to be okay there. I think one of the big things for BYU in this game, win the middle 8, the last 4 of the second quarter, the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. You think about BYU in third quarters this year, that's been the area, the one quarter where they're not as dominant against their opponents, only outscoring their opposition in third quarters this year, 46-29. You look at the fourth quarter, 104-48. BYU puts the hammer down on teams in the fourth quarter when they have a little bit of a lead. They can pull away. So, and that TCU game, that helped with that as well. But I think the middle 8's going to be huge in this game, because if you can, if BYU wins the toss, which going up against Cincinnati can never win a coin toss. I was looking at some of their stats. They've had this complete unlucky streak of not winning the coin toss. If BYU wins the toss, they're going to defer. If you can score near the end of the second quarter and then start things off in the third, you can create a nice cushion and really pull away from Cincinnati. So I think that middle 8 is going to be key for BYU in this game. I'll give my score prediction coming up a little bit later here in the show. Let's take a timeout. On the other side, we get to more BYU football talk and some Big 12 talk as well right here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Mitch Harper with you every day talking BYU and Big 12 sports here on Cougar Tracks. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast, audio form. And, of course, you can subscribe to the KSL Sports YouTube page or just like this video. However, leave a comment. Give me some shout-outs. Appreciate all the hype and engagement that this show provides to Cougar Nation. It was a lot of fun flying in on Thursday, seeing a lot of Cougar fans. There were a lot with BYU's communications department, some people that work with BYU on the flight into Cincinnati, but a lot of Cougar fans. It's a relatively small stadium at Nippert, not big in terms of capacity, but Cougar Nation, doesn't matter. If there's a game that BYU's involved with in a part of the country that BYU doesn't typically play in, Cougar fans in the surrounding areas are going to show up and make their presence felt. So I'd fully expect Cougar fans there'll be pockets of royal blue in the stadium. And one thing I do love about BYU facing a team like Cincinnati where their colors are completely different than BYU, that royal blue is going to pop in the stands at Nippert Stadium wherever they line up in the crowd. But right now, it's time for my Big 12 picks for the week.
Big 12 picks. In the deepest conference in America, anything can happen. Mitch tries to tell you what will happen next. It's his Big 12 picks. Big 12 picks.
So Big 12 action this week. BYU could clinch a spot in the Big 12 championship game this week with the following. I kind of went over it earlier this week, but just to recap, there's two paths for BYU to earn their spot in the Big 12 championship game this week. A win over Cincinnati plus losses by Arizona State and Houston, and BYU goes to Arlington automatically regardless of what happens against UCF in the regular season finale. Or BYU beats Cincinnati, that's one, plus an Arizona State loss and a Utah win, and then BYU would go to Arlington. So let's break down the games for the Big 12 this week in Week 13. Hard to believe that we're already at the penultimate week of the regular season in college football. Kansas at Iowa State, 10 a.m. FS1. Give me the Cyclones to take down Kansas. Kansas is 5-5, looking to get to the postseason. I'm not sold on this Kansas team at all. I think they've got to win here if they want to have any chance to go to the postseason, because in the final week they play Utah to close things out on Black Friday. Baylor at Arizona, 11 a.m. on TNT. Can we rank Arizona already, please? One of the best wins on BYU's resume this season. Baylor is a complete mess. Mack Rhodes, the AD, no longer part of the athletic department. So you got to think Dave Aranda is only a matter of time. We're going to see him announced and get fired from this Baylor program. You would think now with a new AD coming into that program here soon. I'm going with the Wildcats to get a big win over Baylor. Kansas State at number 12, Utah, 2 p.m. on ESPN2. I was kind of bummed here in my hotel. I have all the sports channels pretty much, but ESPN2, for some reason, will not work. I don't know why. I can watch, of course, on my computer and my app on my phone. First world problems, I know. But I was like, why is ESPN2 not working? Because I wanted to watch that game while I'm hosting my show. Anyway, first world problems again. I think Kansas State hangs with Utah for a half. Remember, Kansas State gave Texas Tech everything they could handle for a half. I mean, Kansas State had Texas Tech on the ropes until some turnovers and a lot of miscues in that second half against the Red Raiders, and then Texas Tech completely pulled away. But that was a close football game for 30 minutes. I think Kansas State can hang with Utah for the first half. I think Utah pulls away. I don't think this is a 35-point win like Utah's been hammering teams outside of the games against Texas Tech and BYU this season. I think Utah wins, but maybe it's closer than you would think. I'm saying maybe a 10-point win. I think Utah's favored by about 17. I'll go with the Utes, though, to get that done over K-State. TCU at number 23, Houston, 2 p.m. on Fox. I said this back on First and 12. Shameless plug. I host a Big 12 show with Alex Keary weekly on KSL NewsRadio, talking all things Big 12 football. And I said back in September, it was after the Colorado game where Houston beat Coach Prime and the Buffs at home on a Friday night. And I remember watching that game thinking to myself, there's a path for Houston to get to 9-3. Well, they're 8-2. They're nationally ranked in the college football playoff rankings at number 23. They win this game, they get to win number 9 with a chance to get to 10 in the regular season finale and still an outside shot of getting to Arlington. I'll say Houston takes down TCU. The Horned Frogs still are without Kavorian Barnes, their star running back. And again, I think TCU's kind of soul is lost after that performance last week against BYU. I'd be impressed if they show some fight and bounce back a little bit, but I think BYU took any momentum or any hope of a turnaround this season for TCU. They took that away. I think Houston gets it done over the Horned Frogs in Clutch City. Oklahoma State at UCF, 2 p.m. on ESPN+. If you're choosing to watch this, you are a Big 12 sicko, and I'm here for it. UCF is a massive favorite in this game. Oklahoma State has not won a game in Big 12 play since they beat BYU in 2023. Can you believe that? It's been so long. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to this pick. I think it's a little bit of, is it really possible that Oklahoma State goes 2 consecutive winless seasons in Big 12 play? Is that really going to happen? Call me crazy. I'm going to say an upset here. I'm going to say Oklahoma State pulls one off. Now, UCF's got a lot on the line here. They're 4-6. They're fighting for the postseason. They win their last 2, which includes a game against BYU next week. They go bowling. So there's a lot on the line for UCF and a lot, motivation-wise. But I think Oklahoma State showed something last week that they're still fighting. They're still battling. They hung around with Kansas State. They lost that game 14-6, but still there's some fight there. And UCF, I don't think is that good of a team this season. I think Oklahoma State could pull it off. Call me crazy. It might be the craziest pick I've ever made, but I'm going to go with the Pokes to pull off a shocking upset over UCF. And then finally, number 25, Arizona State at Colorado, 6 p.m. on ESPN2. Jordan Tyson is questionable. Their star wide receiver for the Sun Devils. This game is taking place amid all the reports that Sam Levitt might be leaving the ASU program after this season, and then his brother Dallin Levitt sends a text that Sam hasn't completely made his decision yet. Well, why does he need to make a decision? Anyway, it's a strange deal right now in Tempe, and then in the backdrop, you've got Kenny Dillingham. Does he leave? I don't think he should, but yet this is still a good football team, Arizona State. They're nationally ranked in the CFP Top 25 at number 25. They're going at Colorado, who has nothing to play for. This is going to be a complete roster flip, I would imagine, for the Buffs, other than, Juju Lewis and Jordan Seaton along that offensive line and their star quarterback. I'm going to say Colorado hangs around for a little bit, but ultimately Arizona State pulls away, run-heavy attack with Jeff Sims. I think Arizona State gets it done. So based on my predictions, no help given to BYU to clinch and punch their ticket to Arlington based on what I just laid out in my Week 13 picks. But that's my predictions for Big 12 football in the penultimate week of the regular season. Taking our final break, I'll get to my score prediction for BYU and Cincinnati next here on Cougar Tracks. Cougar Tracks rolls on here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Mitch Harper here with you from Cincinnati, Ohio, site of BYU versus Cincy tomorrow night, 6 p.m. kickoff right here on KSL. And it's time now to give you my score prediction for the Cougs and the Bearcats.
Score prediction. Will BYU come out on top? It's time for Mitch's score prediction for the next game.
I'm not going to lie, I feel pretty good about this game for BYU. I feel really good about this game. 2 weeks ago, I was kind of talking myself into BYU being competitive against Texas Tech. I like how BYU matches up against this Cincinnati team. I really do. I think BYU matches up well. Now, Cincinnati poses some challenges, particularly defensively. It's a unique scheme, 3-3-5. Maybe the stats don't look elite, but they've got some good personnel. A guy like Jake Golday, Dante Corleone, the godfather on that defensive line. And Aaron Roderick knows that Cincinnati is not going to be a pushover for BYU's offense.
Yeah, I mean, they have good man, the defensive line's really good. Those linebackers are good, and they're big. The linebackers are 6'4", 240 each, the two inside guys, and the D-line is very good. And and it's a tough scheme too. I mean, it's a unique scheme, and you have to do unique things to try to attack it. And we definitely have our hands full for sure.
They do, and you got to take care of business. And I think an area where BYU has to take care of business is in the fourth quarter. And doing some digging on some numbers on BYU, fourth quarter, BYU wears down their opponents on the ground, and I think they'll do that again here against Cincinnati. You go look over the course of this season, BYU averages 5.09 yards per carry in fourth quarters this year, with 24 carries of at least 10 yards or more. So again, BYU is the type of team that will wear you down, and Cincinnati is not great at stopping the run. They're subpar. They're below average, and I think that's a good sign for BYU to really impose their style of play onto this game and unleash LJ Martin for a big game. And I think LJ is going to have a big game. And I think BYU, too, they are really good when they convert third downs over 40%. I'm going to say they do that in this game. In the games this year where BYU's had 40% or better in third down conversion rate, it's happened 5 times, and the average margin of victory in those games, 28.2. So I think BYU converts more than 40% of their third down attempts. Cincinnati is, defensively stopping teams about 38% of the time, conversion rate. So, 61st nationally is the Bearcats in stopping teams on third down. And a goal for BYU's offense is to average at least 3 points per drive. You think about that, about 11 drives in a game, give or take 10, 11, maybe 12. So I'm going to say final score prediction for BYU. I'm going to say BYU gets it done. 33-23, BYU over Cincinnati on the road, a double-digit victory inside Nippert Stadium at night. Energy, the excitement's going to be off the charts, but I think it also is going to be the type of crowd that if Cincy has some struggles early, they're going to say, oh, here we go again. Another loss is incoming, because this is a group right now that's like all the momentum from earlier in the year for the Cincinnati team has kind of gone out the window. I think the big noon kickoff dynamic has added a little bit more excitement, a little more juice in the night game piece. So that sort of aspects of this matchup has really magnified the game for Cincinnati fans, and it's senior day, so it's a big opportunity for their senior class, which has been kind of the foundational group in getting them ready for the Big 12. But I think BYU gets it done. And, players that I'm curious to watch for BYU today, obviously Bear Bachmeier, LJ Martin, Carson Ryan, how does he follow up his career-high day against TCU? Cody Hagan, he's the third leading rusher for BYU this season. It's hard to believe he's a wide receiver for the Cougars, but after LJ, after Bear, it's Cody Hagan who's third in rushing yards. He's expected back after missing last week. The defensive tackles, as we discussed earlier, and then Evan Johnson as well. Also the punting situation, Sam Vanderhaar, Fuller Shirts. Kalani said last week that Sam Vanderhaar was dealing with a little bit of an injury. The punting situation has not been good the last 2 weeks. I'm curious to see how that plays out for BYU. And complementary football has to show up, because 2 weeks ago in their last road game, it was non-existent. And speaking of special teams, Cincinnati really good on field goals this year. 90% in Big 12 games in field goals. So they've been pretty lights out with their field goal kicking unit. So they feel confident there. BYU, I think, still feels great about Will Farron, but it's been a little bit up and down at times. I thought last week was a really good turning point for Will as they head down the stretch run. But I'm going to say again, Cougars get it done 33-23 over Cincinnati. I'll have you covered from inside Nippert Stadium on KSLSports.com and my socials at Mitch_Harper on X and in Instagram. I'll have you covered throughout the game, and also post-game reaction here on the Cougar Tracks podcast and so much more. We'll have a bunch of content from here in Cincinnati to have you covered for BYU and Cincy. A huge game for the Cougars' chances for not only the Big 12, college football playoff hopes. So much is on the line for BYU in this game, and we've got you covered right here on Cougar Tracks. We'll talk to you next time here on the show. It's Cougar Tracks. It's powered by KSLSports.com.